Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi, welcome back to Matsa Surba online English lesson. I'm Ratna Hidayati. This time we will learn narrative text, a lesson of grade 9 of SMP or MTS. Before starting, let's say the dua together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami dina wa bi muhammadin nabiyyan wa rasula. Rabbi zidni ilma warzuqni fahma waj'alni min ibadika sholihin. May Allah let our heart be filled with light and insight and knowledge and understanding. Amin. The Islamic base of our lesson today is Surah Al-A'raf, verse 176. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Walau syi'na larafa'nahu biha walakinnahu akhlada ilal ardi wattaba'a hawah famathaluhu kamathalil kalbi in tahmil alaihi yalhath aw tathrukhu yalhath. ذلك مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا وقصص القصص لعلهم يتفكرون. And if we had will, we could have elevated him thereby, but he adhered inside to the earth and followed his own desire. So his example is like that of the dog. If you chase him, he pants. If you leave him, he still pants. That is the example of people who denied our sign. So relate the stories that perhaps will give thought. It is important for us to understand a story. Thus, the aim of our lesson today is to identify social function and text structure of a story. And later on our next videos, you will also learn language features and moral value of a story. Well, let's start the lesson now. Do you know what a narrative text is? Right. It refers to a story. Okay, so it tells about events or experiences. In written form, narrative text is a piece of writing passage that tells a story to entertain people. Okay, narrative text can be a made-up story or fiction or a story that is based on real events. There are many kinds of story. Here are some of them. Fable. Fable is the story of animal. In this story, the animals act like human beings. Folktales. Folktales is a story passed down from generation to generation orally. Fairy tales. Fairy tales is a story that relates much with magic things. Myth. Myth is a story believed by some people, but the stories cannot be true. It was just a story that is told in ancient culture to explain a practice, belief, or natural occurrences. Legend. Legend is a story that relates to on how place is formed. Now let's talk about the social function of a story. What is the aim of a story actually? Well, a story is usually aimed to amuse, entertain, and to deal with an actual or represented experience in different ways through laughter, sympathy, fear, anger, and so on, so that the audience or reader is emotionally engaged. Now let's talk about the text structure of a story. Every story can be broken up into 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, let me show you by using a table. Right. Look at the first part, the beginning. The beginning here is sometimes called exposition or orientation. In this part, we are introduced with the characters, the setting, and the problem or conflict in the story. And then in the next part, the middle or complication, we will learn about the events in the rising action, the climax, and the events in the falling action. And the last part is the end or the resolution. In this part, we will know whether the problem is solved or not. Let's use a plot pyramid to visualize the structure of a story. The first part, the beginning or the expositions, where we are introduced with the characters, the setting, and the problem of the story. And then the rising action events. Then the middle or climax, where this is the most intense part of the story. And the falling action events. Finally, we have the ending or resolution. In this part, we will know, was the problem solved? If yes, how? Let's discuss each part of the text structure. The first one, exposition or orientation. This part tells how the story begins. It also introduces the characters, the conflict or the problem, the setting, and background information. In the middle part, we have complication. This is the rising action of the problem in the story. Okay, the story events in this part lead closer to the climax of the story. Okay, in this part, the reader learns more about the characters and the conflict. Let's talk about conflict in a story. There are 2 kinds of conflict. Okay, the first one is external conflicts. External conflicts here usually are conflict between man versus man versus nature, man versus society, man versus machine, or man versus supernatural agencies such as gods, demon, or fate. The second kind of conflict is internal conflict. Usually, this is a conflict between man and self or inside character's mind. Usually, the most interesting part of a story is the climax. Okay, in this part, the outcome of the conflict is decided one way or the other. This is the turning point. Okay, in this part, the event of the highest interest of or the excitement of the story is found. Okay, nothing is the same in this story after this event because the main character changes or learns something that changes everything. The last part of the complication is falling action. In this part, the events lead to the conclusion after the climax. These events are the result of the changes of the main character or the decision made by the main character during the climax. Everything in this part leads to the conclusion of the story. And the last part of a story is resolution. This is the part of the plot that reveals the final outcome. In this part, the conflicts are solved and all questions are answered. Well, we have talked about the social function and the text structure of a narrative text. Okay, now it's time to do the task. Please apply what you have learned to a story. Okay, the story that we are going to have this time is Jack and the Beanstalk. Okay, please read the story in the Google form attached on your Google Classroom. And then choose the best answer of the questions on the Google Classroom. Okay, here are the questions. What is the exposition in the story you read? How does the action build up or in the rising action? Then number 3, what is the climax of the story? Number 4, describe the following action. And the last, number 5, is what is the resolution? So, let's sum up. Okay, the summary of our lesson today is narrative. Okay, narrative is a story, whether fiction or non-fiction. And then kinds of a narrative, they are tales, folk tales, fairy tales, legend, etc. And the last part in this lesson was the structure of the story. They are beginning, middle, and end. Okay, I hope you have learned a lot about narrative text today. Okay, Alhamdulillah, we have come to the last part of this slide. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you on our next video.